Hey, welcome to Micro Lecture 2.1. This is a fun lecture, I think. It allows us to kind of think outside the box. One of the things that I think tends to happen in criminal justice is we tend to focus on what we know. Maybe this is ethnocentrism or Eurocentrism or chronocentrism. But this is really, I think, an alternative to us to look at things that we may not think of when we look at why the crime rate in the United States has really fallen dramatically. Okay, so I'm going to just look at, I just picked five. And sometimes to be honest, I pick these really because they fly in the face of conventional wisdom. A lot of what we want to believe is bound up in explanations about crime, and I think these challenge some of them. So let's take a quick look at them. They are legalizing abortion, demographic decline, environmental improvement, rising standard of living, and increased immigration. Okay, so the first one is very controversial, but some recent scholarship, and I've got citations to a number of these, argue that if you look at the decline in crime, about half, about 45% of it, is linked to legalized abortion. The theory being that, assuming that unwanted children that families couldn't afford to take care of, or children that might be born to individuals that are not ready to be parents, would be at a higher risk of being involved in crime. That once you legalize abortion, you're going to reduce the number of unwanted children, and you're going to have an impact on crime. So we've done a number of studies with this. We've looked at the higher rates of abortion versus those states that have low rates of abortion and look at their crime rate. And there is dispute about this. You know, one of the things I like to emphasize is don't take what I'm saying as the absolute truth. Go out there and find information yourself. Now, don't go out there just to confirm your own bias. Don't say, well, I really think abortion should be legal, so I'm going to go out and find reasons why this study by the National Bureau of Economic Research is right. Go out there with an open mind and ask who's data. Ask what they're saying and why. The next explanation to look at quickly is demographics. Now, this one's pretty strong. One of the things we know is that as individuals age, they commit fewer crimes. So, and this is common sense. A 20-year-old commits more street crimes than a 60-year-old. So if your society has fewer and fewer young people, and that's one of the things that has happened in the United States, there's more people in the U.S., but it is an older population. And that would mean that statistically, if we look at percentage of crime, percentages reflected by population, it's going to decline. And there's a couple charts here. I'm going to flip to one immediately. You can see there that if you look at the blue line, which is going to be the percentage of young adults you have in the society, you'll notice as it went up, so did the crime rate. And then as the percentage of young adults in the society declined, young adults being those from the ages of 15 to 29 there, you're going to see a dramatic drop in crime. Okay, here's one I really like, and this, I'll refer to the article there, Environmental Policy as Social Policy, the Impact of Childhood Lead Exposure on Crime. It is well established scientifically, and this is not up for debate really, that lead leads to violent and aggressive behavior by altering brain chemistry, particularly if you expose children early in their development to high levels of lead. You're going to see increased aggression and increased violence because it changes the chemistry of their brain. Now, starting in the 1960s, we began to remove lead from the environment, from our gasoline, and then if you look at the next chart, you'll see, and now this is offset by a number of years, and this makes sense if you think about it. The reason it has to be offset is if you got rid of a lot of lead in the environment today, first of all, it would take you a while for the lead to start to disappear. If you stop using lead today, it might be a year or 2 years or 3 years until the lead rates begin to fall. Well, okay, so you've got a 3 or 4 year gap. But then you also have to think you're going to have to wait a generation for children that are no longer being exposed to lead to grow up and be in that prime age at which they commit crime. And having looked at this chart, if you would, you'll notice that there's pretty good correlation between lead exposure and crime. So that's an interesting explanation for you to look at and think about. Wealth is one that's kind of a negative idea, and this is the idea that crime is linked to wealth. And this seems very rational, seems to make a lot of sense to us, but it's actually harder to find direct statistical support for this. If there is an impact between something like unemployment or low inflation with crime, it's not a very strong one, because we do see economic downturns, and in these economic downturns we don't see spikes in crime. So wealth as an explanation has its problem, but again, I encourage you, go out and find a study that might disagree with that. Here's one that's contentious. Immigrants. Now, we're living through the campaign season coming up, and immigration is a very hot topic, and very often you'll see stories focusing on immigrants who commit crime. What we do know statistically is, in fact, that immigrants commit a smaller percentage of crimes than Native Americans. So someone coming into the United States and living here that was born in another country, whether it's Iceland or Nicaragua or Italy or Somalia or India, they are less likely than someone born in the United States to commit a crime. Therefore, as the percentage of your population goes up that's an immigrant, you're going to have a lower crime rate. Indeed, that's something of what we saw there, and there's one graph. So what other alternatives? Well, I just have kind of a list here that I thought you should think about, maybe if you're looking for a paper to write in the future or something to think about when you want to think about crime. The decline in alcohol consumption. As more Americans shift from using alcohol as their primary drug to marijuana as one of their primary drugs, or their consumption of alcohol per capita falls, so does our crime rate. Increased incarceration is an explanation. The fact that we locked more people up as a percentage might have lowered the crime rate. More police, better police models, community policing, smarter policing, all these relate to it. Here's one that's very controversial. More guns. As Americans got the right to carry, lawful carry permits, as they got more of those, crime rate seems to have fallen. Again, you have to determine whether we've got a causation, correlation, what else is being affected here, but that's an interesting idea. Decline in cash. Crime is primarily committed on a cash basis. Pretty rare that you charge a stick up on a Visa or American Express. As fewer Americans use cash, crime rate would fall. Use of cell phones as the alternative to keep people out of trouble. Cell phones, if you've ever played, I guess Animal Crossing's the big one, but Candy Crush, if we go back a few years or whatever, that would be an alternative to crime. Gentrification of cities, better psychiatric treatment options would be an option. And finally, less crack cocaine. So all things to think about. Again, just a quickie lecture. Hope you enjoyed it.